Hey guys, Yuri K here. In this video, I will be discussing high elevation travel and altitude sickness, something that I have experience with. First, we should begin by discussing the Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere is composed primarily of three gases: nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. It is comprised of about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and slightly less than 1% hydrogen, with the remainder fraction of a percentage in other gases. The weight of the atmosphere at sea level, on average, is about 30 inches in barometric pressure, or 1,000 millibars. As we begin to go up in altitude, the weight of the atmosphere decreases, and so the density of the gases decreases as well. So while the proportion of the gases within the atmosphere will remain more or less the same, the total weight of the atmosphere is going to be less, and so the actual amount of oxygen as we travel up will be reduced. As a matter of comparison, when one travels to the top of Mount Everest, the highest mountain on Earth, at about 29,000 feet, there will only be about 30% of the oxygen available compared to what's available at sea level. So, if one goes directly from sea level up to the top of Mount Everest without the proper adjustment or acclimatization, they will most likely suffocate in about 5 minutes. As mentioned, acclimatization is the key, and that is going up to a high elevation at a slow and measured pace to allow the body to properly adapt to the decrease in oxygen. So how does the body do this? There are two ways primarily. One, we begin to breathe more frequently and in deeper breaths in order to supply our body with the necessary oxygen in order to function properly. Another way is our body begins to produce more red blood cells in order to carry the additional oxygen to the tissues and vital organs in our body, and so our blood becomes thicker in the process. However, if we exceed our body's capability to adapt, then we begin to experience what's known as acute mountain sickness or altitude sickness. And that is a series of symptoms that result from the body's inability to adapt to the reduction of oxygen at high altitude. And these can manifest themselves in a number of ways. Everybody's going to respond differently, and one's age, gender, or fitness level has no bearing or determination on how the body's going to respond. Everybody is going to react differently. Generally speaking, when traveling from sea level to a higher elevation, one begins to experience symptoms at around an elevation of 8,000 feet. About 20% of the people will experience these symptoms, and about 75% of the people will experience symptoms at about 10,000 feet or above. One of the most common symptoms that one will experience resembles having a hangover, and it is a throbbing, persistent headache. Other symptoms include a loss of appetite, nausea, sometimes vomiting, diarrhea, tiredness, and also a shortness of breath, as if one is out of shape, even if they are fit. This is the early phase of altitude sickness, and while these symptoms generally are not serious, they are worth monitoring. If we remain at a similar elevation, the symptoms will generally improve and even go away in about 1 or 2 days, enabling us to travel higher. However, if the symptoms do not improve, then this is a cause for concern and a reason to travel back down the mountain. One important thing to remember when traveling at altitude is that dehydration can become a problem due to the loss of water vapor through our lungs as a result of the heavier breathing, and so it is important to drink more water than normal and stay well hydrated. Our bodies have the ability to adapt to the decrease in oxygen, that is, the process of acclimatization when traveling up to higher elevation, as long as we go up at a slow and measured pace. On average, a human being can travel up to about 18,000 feet, after which point no further adjustments can be made by the body, and one will physically deteriorate no matter what. However, these elevations are generally reserved for the world's elite mountaineers, and most people do not have to worry about this. However, even traveling to a lower elevation, one still has to be aware of the symptoms of altitude sickness, regardless. As I mentioned before, it's important to go up slowly, such as, for example, if one lives on the East Coast and they're traveling to, say, one of the ski resorts in Colorado, it's a good idea to spend a few days in Denver at about 5,200 feet above sea level in order to let the body adapt to the slightly lower oxygen levels, which will enable a further and easier adjustment up to the higher elevations at the ski resorts, generally above 8,000 feet. It will make it easier for somebody to enjoy the process without having to suffer the symptoms, as opposed to going up straight into the Rockies without a break. There is a very well-known saying among outdoors people, and that is, climb high and sleep low. And what that means is, while you can travel up high in elevation during the day, it's best to come down and sleep at a lower elevation at night. And furthermore, trying not to increase the sleeping elevation by more than 1,000 feet per night. So for example, if you're at 10,000 feet, you can climb up to a higher elevation, but then try to climb back down on the next night to about 11,000 feet, increase of about 1,000 feet from the night before, and keep this at about 1,000 feet per night to enable yourself to properly adapt. If you go up too fast, then you will tend to suffer more high altitude symptoms and you'll have a harder time adjusting. The experience that I had was a number of years ago in Colorado when I was located in Colorado Springs at about 6,000 feet in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. There is a well-known mountain called Pikes Peak, which happens to have a road going to the summit at above 14,000 feet. It is one of the two mountains in Colorado that actually has a road going to the top and is over 14,000 feet, known as the Colorado 14ers. One can get from Colorado Springs to the top of Pikes Peak in a matter of about 2 hours, which is what I did. So as I was driving up, I started developing the symptoms of acute mountain sickness or altitude sickness. You know, the usual throbbing headache, the nausea, the lack of appetite, tingling in my hands and feet, seeing stars in front of my eyes. Nothing too serious, but I definitely did feel it. And driving up the mountain, I was feeling short of breath as well. So even though I'm in shape, I felt as if I was out of shape. So I made it to the top, spent a little bit of time, and then I had to come down quickly because my symptoms were gradually getting worse and my body just hadn't adapted traveling up so quickly. Again, this was nothing serious, but just a reminder of what altitude sickness feels like. However, after that experience, my body had acclimatized sufficiently to the point where now I was able to drive comfortably throughout the Colorado Rockies in the various mountain passes at over 11,000 feet without experiencing any further symptoms. I was now acclimatized. Remember, our body has the ability to adapt to decreasing oxygen levels due to high altitude, and even despite the mild to moderate symptoms of altitude sickness, we can still travel in the mountains safely as long as we monitor these symptoms. On the other hand, if these symptoms are ignored and become more severe, they can endanger our lives, and this is a very real fact for mountaineers traveling at very high elevations. One of the first symptoms of severe altitude sickness is a chronic and persistent hacking cough, which often leads to a productive cough with pink or red froth. In addition, one often develops edema in the peripheral areas of the body, such as the hands, the feet, and the face. That is, they develop swelling due to water retention, and it can also affect the lungs and the brain, which can become extremely dangerous and life-threatening. For example, HAPE, which is high altitude pulmonary edema, is the fluid retention in the lungs which can suffocate you, and HACE, high altitude cerebral edema, which is fluid buildup in the brain which causes intracranial pressure, which is extremely dangerous and requires immediate descent from the mountain. Also, one becomes extremely tired and becomes very, very breathless, that is, not able to catch their breath and breathing very heavy even while resting and not even moving, so that they don't want to do anything but rest. Neurological symptoms can become present too, such as not being able to maintain balance and coordination, such as an intoxicated person not being able to walk a straight line. Furthermore, increasing mental confusion and decreasing ability to make sound judgments can become a significant danger, signifying the decrease of oxygen to the brain. Ultimately, this can lead to delirium, hallucinations, coma, and even death. This is a very real and present danger for those that are traveling at very high elevation and haven't properly acclimatized. Now, this is not to scare you guys, but people have died due to severe altitude sickness high up in the mountains, and it's not something to take lightly. However, most people do not have to worry about this because they are not true elite mountaineers that would experience these kinds of things. These people are usually very familiar with these kinds of conditions and know how to properly take their time to acclimatize. So most people, while they can develop altitude sickness even while traveling at lower elevations, they need to be cognizant of the symptoms. But please do not fear traveling in the mountains, and just simply be informed and knowledgeable of what the symptoms are and how to treat them. And so it is important to know how altitude affects our bodies, to recognize the symptoms, and to know the distinction about whether they are mild or whether they are serious, which will determine if we are enabled to continue up higher, to stay put, or to descend up the mountain. Remember, knowledge is the key. It's important to know how much our bodies can handle and whether it is worth continuing or coming back down. We want to enjoy our travels in the mountains, whether it is for sightseeing, hiking, camping, mountaineering, skiing, whatever the case is. The mountains are one of the most fantastic places that we can enjoy nature, and we want to enjoy them to the fullest without suffering the effects or minimizing the effects of altitude. It's all about traveling intelligently. So this is traveling at elevation and altitude sickness in a nutshell. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please give me a thumbs up. Please comment, share, and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Instagram at YuriK0877 down at the link below. And stay tuned for more. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.